Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome to today's episode where we explore one of the most provocative questions in contemporary thought. That's, is philosophy dead? This inquiry challenges us to consider the relevance and vitality of philosophical discourse in our modern world, where science, technology, and practical concerns often seem to overshadow the old age quest for wisdom and understanding. We will try to answer, was David Hume correct when he disregarded metaphysics as pointless? So, should we say that philosophy hang up its hat and wake off into sunset? But there is always the second part of the coin, or the second face of the coin. That's Max Planck, the father of quantum mechanics, raised questions about the nature of physical reality, leading to metaphysical inquiries. Hansberg, a great physicist, also diluted the concept of verification or absolute determinism in measurement, meaning that we have no clear definition of verification principle. And that this podcast has been divided into two parts, with the second part set to be released soon, inshallah. We are very hopeful that you will like, share, and subscribe our YouTube channel, Educational Cosmos. Thank you very much. A.J. Ayer, a British philosopher, in his books Language, Truth and Logic, claims that the traditional disputes of philosophers are, for the most part, as unwarranted as they are unfruitful. This was the bold claim made by A.J. Ayer in the opening lines of his book. He says that philosophy contains unclear ideas which waste your time. David Hume also regarded metaphysics as pointless, but there's always other side of the coin. You may be knowing that Max Planck, the father of quantum mechanics, raised questions about the nature of physical reality, leading to metaphysical inquiries. Heisenberg, a great physicist, also diluted the concept of verification or absolute determinism in measurement, meaning that we have no clear definition of verification principle. So in other words, shall we say that philosophy hang up its hat and wake off into the sunset? So this topic we are going to discuss once again with Dr. Maroof Shah. Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Assalamu warahmatullah.
Sir, our first question will go like that. How do you perceive the evolution of philosophical thought from ancient to modern times? And in what ways do you think evolution has influenced contemporary philosophical discourse?
I think it is not a very complex story, but there are layers to it. From ancient to modern, there has been primarily a more empirical orientation. So it has been gradually, science has, in a way, we can say, claimed the space for self, and philosophies has been, in a way, reduced to an extent. But there are other reasons for that. But there are huge costs as well. Modern philosophy, we know after Descartes, and then Kant, Hegel, and now postmodern is continental philosophers in their newer brands. But the point is, has philosophy now got its true, we can say, place, which it was given by the ancients? The philosophy in India was called Darshana. Didarjun. So it is closely tied up with religion.
It's closely tied up with religion.
So, and mysticism as well, and had always an interface with poetry. And the same was the case even in, I would say, Islamic tradition, Chinese tradition, other traditions, where philosophy has been always cultivated by what we call sages, and sages have been the preeminent exemplars of ethics. They have been guiding communities. They have been interpreting traditional texts, scriptures. So the point is, once a philosopher was a sage, he was not simply an armchair philosopher who just imagined certain things or disconnected from the people and other questions of life. So my point is, if we just in a way history of decline as well in that. But there has been certain gain, especially when philosophy, in fact, chartered new paths, and modern science was born. In fact, primarily due to we can say, contributions of philosophers, that there was a space for modern science. Then it could assert its autonomy, a sort of autonomy from other sciences.
Well, people can have a very different view to what you said, sir, or very opposite view. Nowadays, people say that the nagging or the burning questions of old times, for example, the concept of life, what is our place in this universe, the concept of consciousness, even how does the universe came into the being, was a subject of philosophy. It was treated to be in the philosophical domain. But as Hawkins said, I don't say rightly said or wrongly said, but I will simply quote Hawkins. He says that philosophy is dead, because the questions which we are in the philosophical domain have shifted to science. In order to know an iota of universe, you need to go through vigorous mathematics. So it's not a philosopher's cup of tea now. What are your views on that?
This has been much debated. Many people have pointed out problems with Hawking's position. But I think one should start from a counterclaim. When we define metaphysics in the traditional sense as the science of the supra empirical world, supra rational world, or the science of ultimate principles, science cannot dabble there. René Guénon was a great French metaphysician. Then he wrote a book on calculus as well, mathematical basis of calculus. And he tried to very clearly show why we need to separate the domains of science and metaphysics, and we should not intermingle the two, and both should restrict that they are trying to make inroads into each other.
Okay.
The point is, science has not replaced philosophy. The philosophical question has remained as alive as ever. For example, the question of meaning of life has not been settled by science and cannot be arguably settled by science. The question of transcendence, the question of values we live by, the question of the why, the question of meanings, the question of relationships which sustain life. That's why poetry continues to be written. Mysticism continues to be cultivated, and it is more popular now in those circles which were more secularized. So after 70s, when sociologists had predicted previously decline of or death of a religion, we have seen religion reasserting itself, and with that, other forms of spirituality, new age spirituality, and great philosophers, traditionalist philosophers, for whom metaphysics is not a rational, in a way, endeavor which we can deconstruct. The Kant's critique of metaphysics does not apply to the traditional metaphysics of which Guénon, Fritjof Schuon, Ananda Kumaraswamy, and even Heidegger talks about. So the question of why is being, science cannot do anything with that. We know that Carnap's dialogue with these Heideggerians. So in the beginning you quoted, for example, this
A.J. Iyer.
We know he had to himself modify his position.
Yes, then he wrote an appendix to his books.
Principle. And now it's a considered opinion of the major historians of philosophy that positivism had its day, and it is greatest spokesperson who was initially in a way who is thought to be the father of it, that great Wittgenstein. He distances himself from it. He in one of the famous conferences on logical positivism, he recited Tagore's poetry. So that was his answer to those who wanted to shell or bracket off religion, mysticism, and this philosophy from what we call it scientific, this dominant. So the point is, there continues to be the question of afterlife in which people are interested. So many studies on consciousness, neurological approach to consciousness, brain chemistry, so many other things, AI, artificial intelligence, robotics, they have come up. But the question of man and his death, his mortality, his being towards death, his finitude, his limitations, but his quest for transcendence, he always seeks himself, he always seeks higher things. Even man is defined as one who wants to transcend himself. Transcend to where? Why? Man is not made for this world only. Now, this is a simple argument from beauty, for example. Beauty always points beyond itself. Why are we attracted to beauty? There are no simple behavioral explanations. So the truth, justice, they continue to haunt us. Why? So science has not been able to take these from our, we can call, primordial constitution.
Exactly, yes.
So
even though Richard Dawkins in his book The God Delusion, he has answered these questions of morality and ethics, but we are not going to discuss those things here. I simply want to ask another question in the same context. Sir, where do we define the boundaries between mind, that's metaphysics, and brain, that's science, and do we need to define certain boundaries?
For all practical purposes, scientists who are operating with the brain, they have to define, and they are working. Anything which we can manipulate, which can measure, which we can quantify, which we can then in a way would science would like to in a way it comes in its domain. But the point is, when we say mind at a metaphysical, we see then the question is basically of consciousness. Is the beginning was consciousness.
In the beginning was consciousness.
And consciousness, that is true, primordial to be in a way. Somehow you try to explain it away. Even if explain it away, the way, for example, if we do not go far, let us see Buddhistic philosophy. It has tried to analyze this nama rupa, we are constituted by these different aggregates. But then what remains after that? Question of something that knows. The question of judgment. See, who declares something to be absurd or meaningless? For example, AJR, you said, metaphysical questions are meaningless or fruitless. They are not fruitful if we engage with them. But the point is, who declares this? Now, religion and philosophy, primarily metaphysics, is concerned with that question: who am I? Now, if who am I is fundamentally a question, which our whole subject is involved. Say Marcel made it a distinction, other Christian philosophers made a distinction. There is a difference between problem and mystery. In mystery, our whole subject is involved. In problem, we can separate it at least conceptually, and then we can dissect it, or we can try to solve it. Science deals with problems, metaphysics deals with mysteries of being, I-ness. It's considered a fundamental, we can say a priori, that we are. Our consciousness of being, it cannot be reduced to any, we can call a simple empirical this. So it in fact it frames the empirical in turn. So it is too primordial to be deconstructed by any empirical investigation.
Investigations.
That was Ibn Sina's argument also, was disembodied mind. We have now so many books being written on disembodied forms of consciousness and how we survive death. NDE debate, huge non-near-death experience debate, and then so many people from so many diverse fields have tried to corroborate the fundamental intuition that somehow we do survive death. This is the intuition, this is the claim of all great religions, mysticisms, traditional philosophies as well. Now what can science do about it?
Well, science has nothing to do with it, if we say at the very first task, because science does not claim to deal with such questions. For example, what happens after death?
Yes.
Science has got a certain property, science has got